Okay, this is the November 12th, 2013 meeting of the Raleigh Conservation Commission. This meeting of the Raleigh Conservation Commission is hereby called to order under authority of MGL, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Town of Raleigh's Wetlands Protection Bylaw, and the Stormwater Management and Erosion Control Bylaw. I will now call the roll for attendance. Dave DeMonico. Absent. Bob Garner.
Here.
Judy Keys.
Here.
Sam Strife. Absent. Kurt Turner.
Here.
Doug Watson.
Here.
Chairing, and we have a quorum present, Mr. Chairman.
Ready? We have to sign,
If I
or
may,
review and sign, I should say.
I'd like to submit payroll request, which does have an additional line on it for the longevity bonus.
How many years have you been here, Brent?
It's going on 10, I think.
Really?
10 now.
Do you got another bonus at 10? Do you know?
Or it may change, I don't know, I've got to check.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's the kind of thing Sam would know. $225 well-earned dollars as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, put up with us on these.
Don't spend it all in one
And
place.
if I may, that's my hour sheet so far.
$11, $12, $13.
No, it's just yours.
Just
They lined up today to get married.
I know.
I heard that. Oh, 11, 11, 11.
Yes.
No excuse for getting the anniversaries.
Anything else?
I guess, since it's an administrative matter and we do have just a couple of minutes, I just want to review, I believe I may have copied the commissioners on the communication that I sent to Mr. Marisano at 49 Wild
Misiano.
Pasture Lane, Misiano.
49 Wild Pasture Lane, yeah, okay.
This was in
Yes.
regards to some debris I found that had been unceremoniously dumped in the conservation restricted portion, the open space parcel part of Wild Pastures, kind of residence. He apparently received a letter at the end of last week, and he left a voicemail message for me on Saturday. I think that's when he may have received the letter. And he also immediately started addressing the dumping of the grass clippings and repositioning the chainsawed section trunk of the pine tree that had fallen over into his backyard. Supposedly, well, based on phone conversation I had with him today, he asked my assistance in locating where the dumped concrete was. He said he had already addressed the mounted grass clippings and that he didn't quite know exactly what to do with the sections of the pine tree trunk, so he had moved them and sort of stacked them. But he is supposed to send me an email giving me permission to enter onto his property, because I believe the folks of his household are all professional folks and work, and he commutes down to Boston, so even meeting him early in the morning wasn't going to work out too well. He gave me permission so he could find out where the concrete was. Now, he did share with me that the 2 dead yew trees were not his, and he directed me to an abutter of his who did have yews utilized in his landscaping regime. That's where the possible origin of those 2 dead trees may have come
That's what
from.
happens when you start a dump.
Yeah.
Everybody says, oh, there's the dump.
Yeah. And plus, I'm gonna look and see what his answer was to the pine tree trunks, because I actually anticipated rolling them and possibly using them to define the edge of the woods road as it goes up behind the residences there, because when you're in the woods, it's very easy to see what the woods road is, but where they cleared the lots back to it, they basically removed the woods that had before defined where the woods road was, and so. Anyway, obviously, I'm not gonna do it if what he has done with the logs makes reasonable sense.
So, but you haven't been out there yet?
I haven't been out there yet, I'm waiting for the email, you
Okay.
know, so that I can get permission to, because otherwise I don't have anything that gives me permission to enter into this property, and I'd rather do that than have to walk around the long circuitous route to get to the back there, although I could do it if I had to, so.
Okay, so, that's really just a status update, right?
Yes.
Is this not on?
Yes, but I wanted to let you know
Okay.
about it because
Sure.
he was very responsive and it was a very constructive discussion with him today.
Great.
And also, our senior assistant, Jean Blanchard, and I worked on this, although she didn't see the final result until this morning when she came in. But apparently the letter had its constructive effect as opposed to being viewed as being just a violation notice. I think that
Right.
discussion-wise, it appeared to get the positive, constructive result that the commission wanted, so.
Great.
Just wanted to
All right.
remember that.
Good. Um,
Okay, here's the legal ad.
So this is the 7:45 item on the agenda. This is a legal notice of the Raleigh Conservation Commission in accordance with the Wetland Protection Act, General Laws 131, Section 40 as amended, and the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, November 12, 2013 at 7:45 PM at the Town Hall Annex located at 39 Central Street to consider a request for determination of applicability application filed by Mr. Bill Demento, Harbor Master, for proposed repairs of the town wharf bulkhead and piling, possibly within the 200-foot riverfront area of the Rowley River, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and bank at 100 Warehouse Lane, map 26, parcel 6 in Rowley.
Now, Commissioners, I received an email from Mr. Demento saying that he had a business engagement that was not going to allow him to be in attendance tonight. He, of course, is submitting the application on behalf of the town, and however the Commissioners wish to proceed, he has been in close contact with me, and we did a lot of preliminary work, and I have distributed to you as a handout the sheet that he came up with the criteria for accepting bid specifications or whatever that he submitted to a couple of contractors who apparently do this kind of repair work. So the context of this is that the Town Landing Wharf. Let's find it here. Which had a Chapter 91 permit issued in 1950. Which at that point in time, one submitted plans to the Commonwealth's Department of Public Works for approval, and that is recorded. So since I've worked for the commission, we have not had a lot of permitting, and probably hardly any permitting that dealt with wharfs, piers, or docks. And therefore, when he told me that got a photograph, or someone apparently backed into the side wall of the wharf that holds earth back. It's an earth-filled.
I mean, this piece here.
Yes, that piece there.
So along here, I think it
Yes,
is.
actually, almost right exactly where the edge of the water is.
Yep.
In that particular picture, which isn't necessarily high tide, but isn't necessarily dead low tide either. So somebody backed into it, split the top edging piece, and actually deflected and pushed out one of the vertical pilings that's driven into the ground, and a couple of the either 2x8s or 2x10 planks. They're probably actually thicker than that. They're probably 3x8s or 3x10s that are crossways or vertical tongue and groove behind and held up by the piling. So dirt was actually starting to leak out and drop onto or into the river, or the tidally influenced portion of the Rowley River there. So I sought advice from both DEP as well as some of the agents that I've met at network meetings, specifically the agent for the Manchester by the Sea and for the city of Gloucester, who both were very helpful in sharing requirements with me. But also I was informed by all parties that I needed to make sure, before the commission could entertain issuing a permit for this structure, needed to make sure that it had the Chapter 91 license. So I actually was able to find it, and so that's why you're being presented with what would constitute a full application package tonight.
Well, just out of curiosity, where did you go to find that?
There was an application submitted by Curly's Marina that I believe the harbor master had assisted with in putting a pump-out facility on the Rowley River, which I think may have been a requirement that was coming through the EPA and through
Right.
DEP or whatever. I can't remember the exact time period on it, but it turned out it was by the same gentleman who had done the survey work and the plans for the land swap with Pearlie's Marina when it was discovered that the town wharf actually, or one of the other town floating docks that's in the picture by the landing, actually, or boat ramp, excuse me, by the boat ramp, actually extended partially onto the Purley family's property or whatever. So anyway, Andrew Agrapoff or something like that. Yeah. Well, it turned out his plans for the pump out, he made reference to the book and page,
Okay.
where, so I found the recorded deed, I guess you would call it, or
Permit.
certification.
Probably a
Recorded permit,
certificate, yeah.
recorded certificate for it, which cited the plan reference.
Cool.
And finally,
Good detective work, because I don't know how else you'd find it.
exactly. Yeah, from 1950, yes.
It's not in our files. We didn't exist. Okay.
These horse, are these town horse?
Yes.
I mean, these
The floats, yes.
floats and stuff, I don't remember them always being there. And it looks like an extension of the marina.
Oh, I can't speak for anything, this picture that's off property.
I know
This
that.
is actually the boundary line.
Maybe they take them out there with them.
You do.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, they have to, otherwise the ice will pick it
Well,
up.
they'll just get torn apart by the
Yeah.
ice.
Store them up here someplace. Okay, so,
So the question before the commission tonight in regards to permitting this work is there is, two considerations. The first consideration was making sure that there was Chapter 91 license issued for the wharf. The reason one needs to verify that is because that license carries with it an obligation to permanently maintain and repair and keep whatever the dock wharf facility is in good condition so that it's not damaging the environment, as in this instance where with the side retaining boards that hold the earth in being deflected and cracked, they were actually allowing dirt and stuff to start to leak out. So the next question is whether the commission would feel comfortable in regards to covering this proposed repair activity through the issuance of a request to determine applicability. There's a couple of reasons the commission may wish to consider that. Number one, the work is totally in-kind replacement of just a very small section of the facility. Almost all the work can be accomplished from the quote-unquote dry side. The only work that really occurs quote-unquote on the wet side, so to speak, is the replacement of the vertical pile. And that more than likely is going to be extracted and then a new pile put in its place. It was suggested to me, and you should have in front of you, if I can find it again. Harbor Master and I have been working on this for a fair period of time, so he actually incorporated what I had suggested for conditions in it. First one was to have all work that was possible occur on the dry side, and it was anticipated that almost everything could be done. And another condition was to have tarps or whatever. Well, to first off, restrict the work to only occur at low tide or two hours on either side of low tide, giving them, the workers at least a 4-hour window for doing any work that had to be done from quote-unquote the river or the beach side or the bank side. And to utilize tarps or other barriers, and to excavate any of the dirt that was retained behind the wall out so that they had free, clear working environment and have that stockpiled away from that area. There's lots of room down there for that to be accomplished. And because it's a wharf, it's got, the vertical sides come at least 1.5 feet, I think it is, above the present level of the dirt that's retained behind it. So there wouldn't be any real fear of anything, sloughing off and going over the edge, as long as they were, careful in how they stockpiled it. Let's see.
Just to be clear, it's not
Yep.
just replacement of the piling, it's replacement of part of the beam structure.
Yeah, the top edging in the photograph, you can see is actually cracked and deflected, and I think there's at least 3 or 4 of the boards that retain the earth in are installed vertically for whatever reason. I believe they're tongue and grooved or whatever. So there's at least 3 of them that are actually cracked. Either the tongue's been cracked off them, or they were actually cracked as they were deflected out and they split further down there, the side there.
What's non-arsenic containing pressure treated wood?
Exactly that.
What,
More than likely
what chemicals are involved?
ACQ, copper,
Copper sulfur.
ammonium, is there? Is it ammonium salt? Ammonium copper salt, I think?
Okay, just a curiosity question.
Yeah.
So in item 2, there's a mention of the 6x6 inch oak beam across bottom section of seawall? Are they going?
Yeah, there's
they're
a-
excavating and then going down in that excavation to repair a beam at the bottom of the excavation on the inside?
It appears that way, and
Okay.
that's probably, I think that's because partially, the vertical planks that are installed, and then you've got vertical pilings.
Right.
So there are cross members
Right, cross beams, yeah.
behind the piling, but that those vertical planks then are supported against.
Mhm.
And I believe there's at least one of those, if not two of those, that are cracked.
Okay,
And so I believe that's to replace.
okay, so it's not only the top,
No, it's not just the top
Yeah.
edging.
but you're going down into the excavation to actually replace that.
Well, I think I
Horizontal.
believe they have to do that to take the pressure off the
Sure.
planks and everything,
To get
to get the new
openings out.
pile,
Yeah.
get the new piling in there, and then put the cross members in.
Take out the old one. You did it.
That's right.
It's proposed to cover this under an RDA because it's anticipated that this work can be performed without having any type of negative impact on
Right.
the resource areas there, and it seemed,
Okay.
it seemed totally within the realm of possibility that, this could be conditioned, through the use of a determination of applicability without necessarily having to go to a notice of intent, especially where it's all basically replacement in kind.
And it seems like all the
Notice.
steps in this spec seem to be addressing, making sure it's all done by land side
Yes.
and,
Well, like I said, the harbor master and I had an exchange of emails, and I sent him basically a listing of criteria as to what some of the other cities and towns agents had provided me, in some cases, examples of notices of intent and stuff with conditions that they had used. And so I drew the conditions from what I anticipated would be the extent of the work that seemed applicable to what was going to be happening here in this relatively small project.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Makes sense. When is the work anticipated? Before winter, I presume?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They
No, I
wanted-
believe he's
they
got
wanted to
it.
go through winter.
I
in
believe
this
he's
condition.
already been working with the selectman's office on what they needed to do
Funding it.
for procurement in order to, get the quotes and make sure that he didn't have to do any further, bidding based on whatever the pricing was. That's all been in his purview. I
Sure,
haven't-
yeah.
Right off the bat, I provided him, he worked the conditions I had given him into this
Yeah.
sheet so he could provide this to the contractors that were bidding on the
Right.
work, so they'd know what they were responsible for.
Okay. Any other questions by commissioners?
just one, do they know how long the existing piling is? So they have a piling ready to match it in length? 'Cause it doesn't show it on the plan, I'm just curious how far below the mud line it actually goes.
Yards and yards and
Well,
yards.
it-
Who
it's
knows?
gotta go down pretty far. Yeah, it's, the soils are kinda lousy, and you're holding back a lot, so.
Get to their hips and look.
I don't know if that copy is good enough, if we've got.
We got them right here. Here they are. Oh, and this, the letter isn't actually.
Well, yeah, because it varies, yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably, it's scaled, so you could actually get it from that.
X years.
There's 5 feet, so.
Although he's got a. That's a good question.
So Ray brought this from the, approved with, I was showing you the job supervisor on this sheet.
Yeah, well, this sheet is not going to be the special conditions sheet, I just,
So it's part of the application here, as well as your separate pass-up tonight.
right.
I think it'd be better to list you as either just the CC or contact, conservation contact, or something like that.
Consultant.
And be not responsible for the work.
Right.
So, you're not-
Yeah, well, I don't think Mr. Keefe wants to be.
Who's he?
He's the guy, he's in charge of
Highway
of
supervisor,
Oh,
highways.
right,
now,
right,
right.
right.
or surveyor, highway surveyor. Well, or acting highway surveyor.
Acting, I think, yeah.
It's hard to tell exactly.
I know, that's, well, that, I thought it came out pretty good for being a 1950
It's pretty detailed, actually.
plan
It
recorded.
just doesn't show how deep they actually go.
Right.
All right, any other questions? Any members of the public have any questions? You're probably not here unless. Let's see. Well, I think the only question you raised that gave me a moment's pause was whether it should be an RDA, and it seems to me that's fine. We're not gonna change the conditions down there at all by approving this,
Right.
we're just gonna repair.
Right, well, I just, again, wanted you to
Sure.
understand that there was the option that you could say, well, no, we think this, I just, as we discussed the scope of work or whatever, it's obviously within at least 3 sensitive resource areas right off the bat that I can think of.
Sure.
If not actually 4, depending on how you view where it is, but it's certainly within the bank, it's certainly within land subject to coastal storm flowage, i.e. the floodplain of the Raleigh River. So you do have the piling and the exterior face of these boards that form the retaining wall are all exposed to the river water. So there's the river itself, is there. So you got bank, river, floodplain.
I guess the one additional question is, the Army Corps engineers also have jurisdiction here, and do they need to sign off on that, or is this fall below their monetary exemption area?
Well, no, the fact that it has a Chapter 91 permit and that this is only repair and replacement in kind. This doesn't trigger the need for any new review or anything. It's,
Well,
No
Chapter 91
expansion.
is a state law, right? And the Army Corps of Engineers, I assume, takes the jurisdiction. of the federal law.
it has, it's under,
Unless
I
there are
believe, the
exemptions.
Clean Water Act, so I believe.
I mean, I'm just raising that as a
State
curiosity.
waterways, it's Chapter
Curiosity.
91.
Right.
Yeah, well,
And I
1950
believe
is long
that's-
before the Clean Water
I
Act.
believe that the state program is authorized by the EPA, so they are acting as the permit and the
The EPA,
regulators.
yeah, I
for
wonder
that.
about the Army Corps, but that's really for Mr. Demento to make sure he's got any other permits he needs.
Right.
Yeah.
I think because it's in the same footprint that it doesn't trigger that review.
Mm-hmm.
That's my
Right.
guess. For-
Right, and
for-
also
for
it
Army
has-
Corps
doesn't have
permit.
anything to do with extending, the pre-existing facility
Right.
into navigable waters.
Yeah, if there was
which
an
is-
expansion, it definitely would, but.
Right,
Okay.
and there's no filling involved. So,
No new filling involved. Right. All right, so unless there's further questions or discussion, if everyone's comfortable with proceeding with it as a request to determine applicability, I think we're in a position to close the hearing and, I don't
It
know,
would be a negative
I guess
determination.
it would be a negative determination
With
option
option
number 3, right?
With conditions.
With
and Based on the
conditions.
discussions, I would add to conditions, to be included with the conditions that are already in that proposed scope of work would be notification of our office when the work begins, and also,
Final review.
no, we always,
Please
no,
work.
we always. All applicable permits and approvals are obtained.
Yeah, okay, maybe we should probably put that in. All right, so do I have a motion to close the hearing on that basis?
So moved?
And is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against? The motion carries. The hearing is closed, and that is that.
Doug, can you pass that down? Thanks.
This is the 8 o'clock item on the agenda. This is a legal notice of the Raleigh Conservation Commission. In accordance with Wetlands Protection Act, General Laws 131, Section 40 as amended, and the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw, a public meeting will be held on Tuesday, November 12th, 2013 at 8 p.m. at the Room 5 of the Town Hall Annex, 39 Central Street, to consider a request for determination of applicability, application filed by Janet Burek-Neff, 174 Haverhill Street, nominee trust, for proposed soil evaluations for design of sewage disposal system, old system to be abandoned, and demolition of existing structure, possibly within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands, all at 174 Haverhill Street, map 15, parcel 100 in Raleigh. Anyone here on that? No? You are. Why don't you come forward so we can hear you and you can hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you folks are also here, you can come forward too if you want.
You're gonna be shy?
No, they're gonna be shy. Okay.
Hi,
And do we have your name, please?
Janet Burek now.
Okay.
This is your opportunity to make your request to the commission. Explain your project, however.
We're here because we would like to have the house, a single-family residential property demolished, and we're pretty sure it falls within the 100-foot buffer zone. We had the area flagged as wetland several years ago. We need to get a new, another botanist out there to, designate what the exact wet area is to see if it's moved a little bit. But as of right now, what you see on one of those maps, one of the photos shows an area that's pretty wet, and you can kind of see the immediate area around the house is the dry area. So what we're just asking is a determination of applicability, so that we could take out the house in that dry area. Pretty much, we think it would come out straight from the front. Brent and I stood out front and just kind of looked at it, and there's a huge pine tree there that we'll eventually take out too, that should not be in the 100-foot buffer zone. It's in the front right corner. But the house possibly, we don't know yet for sure, but possibly that back corner would be pretty much within the 100-foot area. But it's kind of obvious from the photos that the immediate area around it was always our yard, is the dry area. So,
Okay.
and then what we would like to do, which Brent suggested we get that out of the way now too, and letting you know that we'd like to do the parking, in a few months down the road. So we would like to know what you think of the area. Would like to allow that, what you'd allow that to be done in, which again would be the bold marking. Again, just the dry area, because we know It's about a half an acre altogether, but the yard area in the house is obviously much less, so we think would be reasonable to ask that we could have that perked. We kind of think it's gonna end up being that front right-hand side, which would be the most appropriate area to possibly
Where the pine is.
do the,
Currently
yes,
is, yeah.
and maybe a little bit to the right there, but,
Mhm.
for soil evaluations, but we want the option of having an engineer be able to kind of look at those other areas that appear dry. So that's what we're asking
So how do you
tonight.
know where the existing tank is?
I had the diagram from when my dad had that put in 1974 by Mr.
Okay.
Warren.
Well, that's good.
And we did, although we weren't required at the time because we weren't selling it several years ago, we did have it inspected. So my husband and I dug up the covers
Okay.
around the tank, and then
Yep.
the leach pit is beyond that. But I used my dad's diagram, or the diagram he was given at the time.
Yep.
So pretty much made sure we hung on to all that, and we know where we dug and what that looked like at the time.
Yep. Okay. Brent, comments?
Okay, I apologize for not having a written memorandum for the commission tonight, but this is kind of an interesting project. You've probably noticed this small little single-story residential structure that's been slowly having its roof collapse in upon itself along Haverhill Street. And so this is now where the property owners are wishing to start on the project towards restoring a dwelling that can be occupied on the property, which involves a number of steps to start off with. The first step, the demolition, is pretty easy and pretty cut and dry. In regards to whether it's within the commission's jurisdiction, the aerial pictometry that the town obtained in 2012 has fairly clear, definite areas showing saturated soils. And one of the reasons for this, especially this area that, let's see, orientation would be, that would be to the southeast area.
Right.
There is a culvert under drain that goes underneath Haverhill Street and discharges right on the frontage. Now, that does not run and does not show any particular evidence that it actually has bordering vegetated wetlands along it, but there is a depression, and this delineation, which is very old, and so therefore I don't put a lot of confidence in it being a real accurate depiction. When we conducted the site visit just last week, even though we've had a real lack of precipitation and we're into the fall period where the herbaceous layer has died down, so that makes kind of identifying some wetland plants pretty problematic at this time. You could see the topography giving evidence of the flow path from the outlet of the culvert going down into an area where it did kind of spread out. And again, you could see the topography kind of giving you the sense that there were areas. Now, it just so happens that a while ago, the commission may remember last fall, exactly a year ago, when their agent alerted them to a white tarp all of a sudden appearing in the vernal pool on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts
This one?
park nearby. Yes, the vernal pool that was about to be turned into an ice skating rink.
Yeah.
The particular property owner is an abutter to this parcel and had invited me onto their property with another question about where they could do some pruning and some other types of activities. So I actually, during that time of year, we had more normal precipitation levels, and therefore I could see that there definitely was evidence of saturated soils, even though it was the same seasonal time of year with the undergrowth pretty much dead because of the frost action. But that kind of gave me a confidence that there definitely was bordering vegetated wetlands in here, and lining it up with the dark dark aspects of the imagery, which is taken specifically when leaves aren't out so that you could view the ground, gave me some relative confidence to say to the property owners that I was pretty confident that when a delineation is done, we are going to find portions of that structure are within the outer edge of the 100-foot buffer zone. Maybe only the rear quarter of it or rear third of the structure, but so I believe we do have jurisdiction in regards to the demolition activity. In regards to the second proposed activity, which is crushing and filling whatever is there for a previous sewage disposal system or leach pit or whatever, again, because of being able to use the pictometry and make pretty clear measurements as well as a result of the site visit, I'm pretty confident that that crushing and excavation activity will also be occurring within the 100-foot buffer zone of the commission. So then we come to the third proposed activity, which is soil evaluations. Where this property shows definite signs of having been developed and having a lawn area associated with this dwelling, which more than likely was established by the placement of fill in order to level the yard area around the house. And because we're at the end of the season when the Board of Health normally talks with applicants about doing soil evaluations, although I think the Board of Health is more lenient when it comes to previously developed properties as opposed to new construction. I basically think for the commission's consideration that where the proposed soil evaluation, this gives them some flexibility, even though we don't know exactly where the delineated bordering vegetated wetlands will be. And it's always to the applicant and their engineers best procedures to comply with the Board of Health's desire to have sewage disposal systems located as far away from bordering vegetated wetlands as possible. But in repairs and replacement situations, sometimes they can't meet the Board of Health's local regulation for 100-foot separation. And so therefore, this depiction of an area around the house would give them flexibility for design considerations, but it would keep them within the previously developed lawn area that was associated with this dwelling. And I have passed around conditions. I did bring a copy. There's a copy of proposed conditions that the commission recently used for the same type of activity, except in this case it was actually putting in part of the sewage disposal system at 311 Central Street.
Mm-hmm.
But the activities are basically the same, and of course would adjust the proposed conditions here to basically only require the installation of erosion control if for some reason the project, the soil evaluations were going to take longer than 1 day. But you know, the procedure is that they normally do the soil evaluations and backfill and stabilize all within the same day. In this case, the topography is all basically level, very slight gentle slope associated around the dwelling. And so I don't think there's any concern in regards to having to establish erosion control prior to do the soil evaluations. And this gives them the design flexibility where they can investigate more than just that front corner of the property in case they need to do that. If the commission is comfortable with it, anyway, that's.
Makes sense. Commissioners, comments?
This is obviously wrong, this part of it, right?
As I just said, I took a copy of what we had recently issued and would adjust this a little bit. But basically, it's the same type of activity occurring within the same
Right.
same reach of a 100-foot buffer zone.
I I assume you're planning to put a new home on the property?
Yes.
And I presume that will trigger a notice of intent application.
Yes, because they would be looking to not only construct a dwelling, but also more than, they could potentially be putting in a sewage disposal system, which again, depending on what happens with their soil evaluations, there may be some of that work occurring within the 100-foot buffer zone also. But they also, this also gives them the flexibility, because they are, of course, going to seek professional guidance and hire a wetlands consultant, because any registered sanitarian or licensed engineer putting in a sewage disposal system is going to want to know where the delineated bordering vegetated wetlands is before they start committing to actually stamp plans and submitting that to the Board of Health.
And
for
selecting
approval.
sites.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I just felt that, again, since, you know, in my professional opinion, I believe that we could condition the soil evaluations appropriately at this time without knowing definitively what the exact delineation is of the bordering vegetated wetlands. Just assume, for the purposes of our regulatory review, that all of that area could potentially be 100-foot buffer zone, depending on where things get delineated, and therefore issue our conditions because it was a previously developed and previously altered area.
Makes sense.
There's no new clearing proposed in
Right.
regards to this.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. Any other comments, questions?
Regarding the pine tree, we kind of talked, like, we think that's beyond the 100 feet, so we don't have to worry about that right now, as far as when we take that out, the huge pine tree out front. Just want to be clear, the commissioners
Okay,
were
well,
aware
isn't,
of that.
that pine tree wouldn't be taken out until such time as you're gonna put a new system in though, correct?
Right.
So that's not connected with the soil evaluations.
Should we have it connected in terms of the fact that it's gonna, you know, it's gonna come out, the roots are gonna all come out and it's gonna
Well, but
be a hole anyway?
until you know that the soils are appropriate to put a system there?
We can do the soil evaluations first. I was just
Do
asking
you-
what you
She's
what you
asking a
think.
good question, I think.
Because we had talked about how once we do the soil evaluations, obviously they're probably gonna cut into those roots, which is gonna make it unstable, so we knew
Yes.
eventually it would come down. I just wondered, do you?
Right, but we've gone two degrees of separation beyond certainty here.
You know, if we knew where the wetland line was, that would be easier to answer that
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
That's the problem is, seems, you know, reasonably likely it's outside of the 100 feet, but it's not certain.
Mhm.
I don't have a problem saying that the tree should come down now. For the reasons she mentioned, because you might be disturbing roots in soil testing, and that tree's going to be weakened, and pine trees have very shallow roots and go over very easily in high winds, and that's a huge tree.
Yeah.
And if it's outside our jurisdiction, it doesn't really matter a lot. And if it is within our jurisdiction, I still think that it's a potential damage to contractors, a danger to contractors, particularly when you get around to putting a new house in there. You don't want it following on new construction.
You know, I was basically operating under the assumption that it probably wasn't in
Mhm.
our jurisdiction.
In which case we can
And
make it part of a
therefore-
notice of
and
intent
therefore-
later.
Well,
if
no,
need be.
no, you
Let's
don't.
just take it out now, is
No.
kind of what we're saying.
You can take it out now, but I don't think it's in our regulated area.
Mhm.
I think even if it were, I don't think any of us have a doubt that we would let you take it out.
Okay.
So, especially where it's way out where it is, and the risks of a tree like that in that location are significant. So, especially if you've been digging around under it. So, does that answer your question? You're comfortable? Okay. Any other questions, comments? So I need,
Well, let
I
me
guess I
just,
need, yeah.
let me just mention,
You
so,
think about it.
so my, so if there's, you know, you get done with anybody else, if anybody else wants to comment to the commission, well, my suggestion would be to consider a negative determination, option number 3, include conditions that are typical for the performance of soil evaluations, for abandonment and filling of an old septic system, and for demolition, which would be, as I said on the site visit, we typically put a condition in there that says if the commission requests it, written confirmation of disposal of a licensed facility will be made available to the commission at our request.
You mean of the demolition?
Right, just to
product.
make sure
Yeah.
that the demolished house goes to an appropriate disposal facility.
Yep, okay. Okay, so yes, all of those conditions, because we're sort of permitting on multiple
We're doing
activities.
basically
here.
3 activities, and if you
Right.
wish a statement to also be made about the removal of the large white pine tree
think it would
along
be
the frontage
good.
of Havel Street, we
Yep.
can just make a statement that we believe that's outside our regulated area,
Yep.
and therefore it can be removed in an appropriate manner.
Yep, sounds good. So do I have a motion to close the hearing on those terms?
So moved.
And a second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all against, and the motion carries. The hearing is closed, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
Have a minute, but we special request for Brent. Rather than wait till the end when I may forget it. Brent, I know you can't tell with any certainty as to when you're going to have memos prepared or not, but if I may make a suggestion to consider that on the day of a meeting, if you anticipate the possibility that you will not have a memo, if you could give us an email to that effect, and if you do have a memo, that's all well and good, but I, you know, for example, I spend 5 or 10 minutes trying to find a memo that doesn't exist, like I did with this one tonight. And, you know, it's no great problem, but it happens on occasion, and it would be helpful to have some heads up that there might not be a memo for certain things. Is that something to ponder?
The thing I would add to that is, having talked to Brent about this several times, it will most often come up when there's a Monday holiday. Because that's normally a work day for Brent, and it's a day he normally devotes to writing memos, or at least in part. So this is when it comes up, at least 2 or 3 times a year, it will tend to happen.
I'm not buying any criticism here, I'm just trying
That's the reason.
to save
behind
me
it.
some time.
Well, if you can't find the memo, contemplate whether Monday was a holiday first. That might be the answer. All right, but that would be helpful.
Every day's a holiday when you're retired.
Well, I can't help you there. All right. The next item, Brent, do you still taking notes you need to?
Yeah, I just wanted to write down all the points I made, so that
Yep.
when I write the plan, it accurately reflects what we just discussed,
Sure.
instead of like coming out.
Yeah, and I don't want to try to interrupt you because if you're like me, you can only really do that if there's perfect silence. The next item on the agenda is at 8:15 item, a continued enforcement order for land off Main Street in Mud Creek. Map 34, parcel 5, Daniel W. McHugh, Jr., owned by Mass Audubon. On this one, we have a letter from an attorney representing Mr. McHugh, as per our suggestion to him that he consult counsel. He has consulted counsel. This is a letter from attorney Kristen F. Bonavita of Newburyport, dated November 8th, 2013. In relevant part, it requests additional time to support our position. I don't think she specifically requests, does she?
Yeah, I think there was,
I
I think there was a specific request. for-
3-week continuance.
Today was 3-week continuance.
Oh, in the first sentence, there it is, okay. As representation for Daniel McHugh, I am requesting a 3-week continuance in the matter. So, I would be inclined to agree to that. Do we have a motion, unless there is any discussion of it, do we have a motion to continue this to our next meeting, which would be
December 3rd.
December 3rd, 2013?
I'll move.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, no against, and the matter is continued to December 3rd.
Mr. Watson, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Bill Getty, Massachusetts.
Oh, hi, Bill, yes.
Is Mr. McHugh still under an enforcement order so that he is not permitted to be doing work in that area
Oh, yes,
between now and the next 3 weeks?
yes.
Alright.
You mean with respect to the Audubon land, or what we are at the moment believing to be the Audubon land? Yes, absolutely. The enforcement order is still in effect.
All right, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just administratively for the commission's information, the certified letter containing the enforcement order was returned unclaimed. But the first class letter obviously got through to Mr. McKee since he showed up at the office with the enforcement order.
And he attended our last meeting.
And he attended our last meeting demonstrating that he had knowledge of the commission's action. The enforcement order, though, asked for a number of things. One of them was attendance at the meeting, so that was consummated. But we also asked for a statement of his intent to comply, and that did not occur.
So that did not occur.
Just to let you know where that particular situation stands.
Yes.
Okay.
Brent, do you know if the gentleman just left has a copy of the one of you?
Yes,
Okay.
just scanned an email to them. And Mr. Chairman, I am looking for the letter requesting
This next
continuance
matter, yeah.
for,
So this is the 8:30 matter, continued notice of intent for land off Daniels Road, map 9, parcel 23, Tompkins Desjardins Trust, Bruce Tompkins trustee. And we have a letter from applicant's representative, Mr. John DeCoulis, dated November 7th via email. Dear Mr. Baslak, the stormwater reports have been submitted to Horsley and Witten for technical review, and we are waiting for their report. Kindly continue the public hearing for the Marion Way project, DEP file number 063625, to your December 3rd, 2013 meeting. John DeCoulis. Oh, Brent, we have a report here from Horsley Witten.
well, yes, today at approximately 5:10, we received via email
Okay.
the first review
Yep.
report from Horsley and Witten. Just prior to that, I had received a request from Mr. DeCoulis to contact Horsley and Witten to request that he receive a text Word document so that his doing a response, he'd be able, I'm assuming, would be able to cut and paste, which sometimes you can't do from PDF documents, depending on how they're created. And so Horsley and Witten was very accommodating and sent along an attached text Word document to be provided to the applicant's representative, which I did electronically.
Okay. So where this stands then is around the 7th or before he submitted his stormwater plan, we have the comments of Horsley Witten on that and anything else they commented on, which have now been transmitted to Mr. DeCoulis for his comments and response, and that's what we'll be doing on December 3rd.
Right, as well as on December 3rd, we will have Horsley and Witten in attendance
Right.
to present to the commission the results and answer any questions in regards
Yeah.
to the review. There may also have been an exchange by them.
Between them.
Yes.
Which is what I would hope.
Right.
And that's why I'm glad to hear that Mr. DeCoulis is already in the process of preparing his comments to because that's only way we're gonna get this to move forward.
Right, right.
Okay,
So,
so we still need a motion to continue this matter to December 3rd meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against? So December 3rd for that.
Just almost back on schedule.
Ski slope.
Look at it that way, yeah. All right. This is the 8:35 PM item and the 8:40 item. The first of which is the continued stormwater management permit for 111 Newburyport Turnpike, map 14, parcel 17. Second of which is the continued notice of intent for the same property, both owned by Artistic Landscapes LLC, Tony Hurley principal. So let's see, Mr. Holt, welcome. You're probably Mr. Hurley, right? You're welcome to you. We have Mr. Holt's submission dated October 31, 2013, which is itself a step-by-step response to the comments of Larry Graham on behalf of the town,
planning board,
the
yeah.
planning board specifically. So,
Which is also where our reliance is upon a review of the stormwater system.
right. So if I remember this correctly, our jurisdiction of this is primarily the stormwater issues, right? We don't have jurisdictional wetlands in this, or am I wrong?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we do,
Yeah,
okay.
this is zone 2.
This is, okay.
Almost 90% of the site is
Okay.
in zone 2, so it
That's what I
is
misremembered.
jurisdictional under our bylaw, but there are no Wetlands Protection Act.
Just for the folks at home,
Resource
zone
areas.
2 is what?
It is the approved groundwater aquifer that supplies water to Raleigh's drinking water well that is located at the intersection of Route 133 and Route 1, just adjacent to the ball field that is there.
Thank you.
All right, so, Mr. Holt, would you like to walk us through what's changed since the last time you were here?
So majority of the issues that changed were from the planning board perspective, in terms of some grading and some other items that had to do with signage and things like that. So we addressed most of those issues from the planning board perspective. At the last meeting, Brent went over a few items that he had concern with the stormwater, which we also addressed those issues along with Larry Graham's issues with the stormwater itself as well. So those have all been addressed, and reports gone back to Larry for his review, and I believe he's reviewing it right now, and he anticipates having that done in the next few days, by the end of the week. He could get it back to us. So what we did was basically we met with the planning board. I don't know if the conservation, how many members were out there at the meeting, the site walk? I don't think they were.
No, I think the zoning board.
The zoning board and the planning board, and Larry met up at the site to go over some of the issues with respect to the planning and the zoning. Since then, the zoning has approved the variances we asked for. We've had, Mass Highway has approved the location of the driveways, given the permit for that. One of the issues that Brent had brought up as far as the drainage off of Route 1 entering the property, there is a berm that goes from the top of the hill down to where the existing driveway is now and ends there. There was an opening in the curb right at this telephone pole where some erosion had occurred. It actually looks like there might have been an accident there or something because the guardrail had been bent in and it had disturbed the curbing. When Mr. Hurley spoke with the Mass Highway Department regarding to the entrance, he mentioned this location and the curb there that was missing. It was designed to have a curb the whole entire length down to this point. So none of the water was supposed to come off and go onto the property. It was supposed to run down the gutter and stay along the gutter and down to past the property. So Mr. Hurley spoke with the Mass Highway and asked them to correct that problem, and I believe they indicated they would. If they didn't, by the time we were constructing this, that they gave him the okay to fix it at that
Correct.
point. So what we have basically done is shown the curb to bypass that, to correct that problem, so there'll be no more water running off in this location. Larry Graham had brought that same issue up in terms of the water entering the property, which shouldn't be entering the property. And as it was designed originally in Route 1 plans, the runoff was supposed to go down the gutter and go past the property and then enter into some runoff, some drainage down below. So what we did is, there's a slight berm along, earthen berm along beyond that point, other than where the driveway is, that would have the water flow past the property and not come onto the property. So all the runoff from the road itself would not be entering the property. Originally, I designed it for that water to come onto the property, and we addressed it in our design, which was the reason why the pond was larger. So with the curb berm being here, we're gonna create a berm at each of the driveway entrances and exit, so that the water will flow past the driveway and not go into the property. And I'm gonna create an earthen berm along the property line, actually beef up that existing one now, but it's not quite defined. So we're going to better define that berm so that the water will continue to flow past and won't go onto the property. With that change, a lot of the runoff onto the property was decreased, because that's most of the water was in the pavement was coming onto the property, and we had to deal with that. With much less water coming on the property, we were able to make the pond much smaller, which helped us on our grading, because one of the issues with the planning board was the grading of the driveway coming in and going out. They wanted it less grade than what we had proposed. So it took a little while to come up with a grading plan that would work without having extensive walls in the back, and then change the drainage accordingly, which is what we had done. So right now, the drainage is designed for the 210 and 100-year storm with a much smaller pond detention area. All the calculations have gone to Larry to support that. One of the other issues that Brent had brought up was there was no shut-off for the drainage system before it entered into the infiltration system. We added a manhole with a shut-off, which is basically a threaded cap that we'll be able to put on the pipe in the event of a spill. There is a grease hood in the catch basin, so if something should spill, there's a little bit of time to get that on, so that there'll be a metal hatch there on the hinge that will be able to be lifted up, and then the cap will be right inside the manhole and it'll be able to be put on to stop the flow, so there'll be no flow into this area should a spill happen in the driveway or in the parking lot. So that's those are two major drainage changes. Was that we redesigned the ponds to have less runoff coming onto the property, and adding that shut off that Brent had requested that we add as a turn off fail safe for the drainage system during a spill event. And the other changes are mostly involved with the planning board, and they're all listed in the highlights. So that's kind of the major two changes that we did. We also revised the SWIP document and presented that to Brian. So I don't know if he's reviewed it yet. It's quite lengthy.
Well, no, I didn't review things for Thursday.
Yeah. So, but we did address all the issues that were brought up in Brent's comments. As far as the design goes, it's still a 6,500 square foot building with 10 parking spots. We have pervious pavers in the front section. Again, the variances have been granted. The Mass Highway Department has approved the access. I think Larry's happy with the grading. I know we have talked to Larry about the grading. The new grading that we propose, he's happy with that. He's now reviewing the changes in terms of the drainage goes. And I don't anticipate that any changes he has will be minimal compared to the previous review. And I think those can be addressed fairly quickly in terms of any issues you might have after the next review.
Right?
We have not received a revised stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Maybe. Not printed.
This, we got drainage, we got revised drainage analysis, your response to Mr. Graham's comment, and 4 sets of plans.
We can definitely get it. It's all set, it's all been done. It's all
I'm
been-
not doubting your word, I'm just,
I
you
just
said we
don't
got
know.
it, I'm just
I'm
telling
sorry.
you,
I
we
apologize.
hadn't happened to get it yet.
Even if we did get it on Thursday,
Right.
it wouldn't have been reviewed, but still,
Right.
won't be reviewed until we get it, so. Okay, so Brent, you're gonna basically have to withhold comment on that until you see it.
Right, and that's why there was no comments in regards to this particular applicant
Right.
submittal, because they were received on Thursday.
With respect to the other issues Mr. Holt was addressing, any comments on those?
Well, I really can't until, I mean,
You gotta see that other part of it.
he certainly touched upon, in, you know, my brief looking at the revised plan that came in, I could see that, and saw that the roadway, because that was a big thing, because of course that was putting a burden of the Commonwealth's roadway runoff onto the applicant's private development, so. So
Right.
certainly that relieves some of the pressure off of private infrastructure here. Now, the emergency shut-off. So and again, I haven't seen the SWIP plan, so that's been revised and that has a training protocol. So whoever staffs this facility is going to be able to activate
Yeah,
that cutoff, that shut-off. Now,
Right.
so
Yes.
they've got to lift a 100-pound manhole cover.
Actually, it's not a 100-pound manhole. We
Oh,
are
okay.
proposing a hinged, it's actually an aluminum, it's an aluminum cover, so it's very
Okay.
relatively light. It's for access, it's to be able to
And
access.
then they have to what, suspend themselves by some carabiner and some rappelling hooks and lean down into a bottomless manhole and figure out whether the threads go counterclockwise or clockwise on this thing? How does
It
this
has to be
work?
threaded, and it's about 3 foot, it's a rim elevation is 70.6, and the pipe's at 67, so it's 3 feet down.
All right,
We can have them install a ladder into the manhole. We put ladder runs in so they can get down.
well, I was being a little facetious here, but
They do have to
I
get
wanted to
through
make
this.
sure that, you know,
Yes, hopefully they will be able to do
and the
that.
diameter of.
It's a 4 foot diameter manhole,
Okay,
and it's the hood, or the access is an aluminum hinge, comes up like a door,
right.
locks open so that they can use it. We
It's
didn't
just
wanna-
like
we didn't
going,
wanna put
just like
300-pound
going
manhole.
down into a missile silo.
Yeah, we didn't want to put the 300-pound manhole because obviously that would be very difficult to get off
Right.
in a hurry. So,
Is the hatch in the parking area?
yes, it's actually right here.
Okay.
The catch basin's right there and the hatch is right there.
So
So-
that'll always be kept clear of snow then whenever,
Right.
whenever you're
But
open.
can vehicles drive on the
Yes,
hatch?
yeah, it's designed for
It's H20?
H21, yeah.
Okay.
How easy is it to lift the lid?
It's actually got a handle on it. It's, I don't have a detail. I have a detail I can provide. It's got a handle and it just,
What's
Open
the
it.
diameter?
I think it's actually square and it's 2.5 by 2.5, so.
What I'm wondering about is, can that be locked so the kid can't come along and open it and
I'll
fall
double
in?
check the manufacturer. I think it can have a locking mechanism.
They have keys,
Right.
little T keys that can lock it.
So I can double check on the specs and we can make sure we can get one that locks.
Well, that's why you have to have a training protocol so that, you know, whoever's in the building when anything happens knows exactly where the key is, knows exactly what to do.
Right.
'Cause having a shut-off doesn't do you any good if they don't know how to shut it off.
Out of curiosity, in the event of a 200 or 300-foot rain event, where does the water go?
In the event of a what?
200 or 300-foot a year storm, where does the water go?
This is an infiltration system for the lower storms and then a tension pond for the larger storm, for the 100-year storm. There's an overflow broad-crested weir right here. We actually are paving that so that it won't be gravel, so if it does flow over, it won't erode. And then there's riprap on a downhill slope. So this is a wide, broad-crested weir, which is a wide weir. It's basically, it's like a berm, basically. It's-
So it goes into the marsh.
Yeah, it goes over and then flows into the.
Well, actually, it takes it a while, because there isn't any marsh close to
Right,
this
yeah,
property.
it goes, has to flow down this way.
Goes over into wooded uplands,
Yeah, and then it flows
along
this
the
into
old
a
woods
direction.
road that goes over into the Ipswich Country Club.
It's actually a high spot right in here, so actually this would flow this way and then into another wetland swale. Goes off.
Yeah, sooner or
Right in
later,
front of the,
everything in Raleigh, sooner or later goes to a wetland.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so it is designed for the larger storms to be able to go over the driveway. And so we did pave that 10-foot section so that it wouldn't erode during that event. For a 100-year storm, there's no flow out over that. It's up the
Understood.
pipe.
Understood.
So where do we go from here? Brent, you need to review the stormwater plan, obviously.
Well, right, as well as, review the plans, get the.
Right.
And in terms of the stormwater management permit, we're still waiting for Mr. Graham, because we utilize his
Right.
services offered through the planning board as the technical review for this.
So when do you've got your zoning board approval? I think I heard you say, when do you next see the planning
Planning board
board?
is next Wednesday, so we can,
Tomorrow?
no, next Wednesday, following Wednesday. So, yeah, we do anticipate having Larry's review by the end of the week. Depending on what he has to say, we hope to have it revised by that Wednesday so that it can be further along.
Is the stormwater management permit necessarily a precondition for us filling in the notice of intent?
No, but I think it sounds like we have the capability of accomplishing both permit issuance at our December 3rd meeting.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Assuming Larry doesn't come up with anything
Right.
surprising, which I would not expect. He's seen it once already, and you've been responsive to his concerns, so.
And once Brent gets a chance to look at this, if he has any comments, he can
Right.
get them over to me and I'll make the changes right away.
Yeah, which will be after Larry looks at the same thing, and you'll look at his comments, so it should all work out for the
Yeah.
December 3rd meeting. Does that sound realistic to everybody? It does to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else we need from these folks? I think it's just that, right?
Yeah. That's all.
Okay. So, if everything is, if there are no concerns, I'm just thinking about whether you particularly, Mr. Holt, need to be here at December 3rd meeting. If we don't have any concerns that we voiced to you, just trying to save you some funding.
Yeah, certainly if everything is in order and everything's taken care of as far as the SWIP goes and Larry's comments.
Okay, well, why don't you check with Brent at that point?
Exactly.
If that's the case, it's certainly okay with us to handle it that way. All right, so we would just need, at this point, we just need a motion to continue this to December 3rd hearing.
Yeah.
I guess that's all
If
we're
they grant us
doing.
that permission, as well as give us
That's okay with you?
two copies of that SWIP plan.
Um, Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that motion carries. We'll see you December 3rd, or perhaps we won't even have to see you. All looks in order. We will be in position to approve it. Great.
Duplicating that motion for both the notice of
Oh,
intent
yeah.
and for the stormwater management permit.
So that one was for the stormwater, and the same motion for the notice of intent, the motion to continue to the December 3rd meeting. So moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I do that likewise. That is good. Thank you, folks.
Thanks. Good deal.
Mr. Todd, how are you?
No, I'm fine. So far.
So far?
Mr. Chairman, should we move to,
Yes.
Mr. Todd's here for the certificate of compliance request for 303 Main Street.
Why don't we do that then?
farm pond that just won't go away.
This is an ancient plan.
This is an ancient one plan, 63-99. Permitted in 1989, I believe.
Yes.
I think that's when the order was issued. Yep, August 29th, 1989. Now, my predecessor had sent a letter to Mr. Todd back in January 8th, 2002, alerting him to the fact of the open permit for creation of the farm pond or whatever, and I guess, I don't know what happened. Then, at some point in time, I noticed it. I think this came up for discussion when we were working with Mass Highway to try and get them to control their excessive runoff that they were directing across the Todd Farm property into their collapsing drainage easement that was forming sort of the Adobe Gorge or whatever, wherever the Leakeys look for pre-human fossils or whatever. I think you were working on a canyon or something on the property. So I think that's when this came up, because I found that we had worked on a request to determine applicability in 2007, where you addressed some of the soil stockpiles down there and did some remedial grading and stuff to kind of dress things out, with the idea that once that was done, you'd request a certificate of compliance.
Oh, my brother got into it.
Yeah, so here we are in 2013, where we have a request to close this old expired order of conditions for the construction of a farm pond. And I know that the stockpile stuff pretty much got taken care of.
It's still there.
They're still there? Some of it's still there. Well, you moved some of it, right?
I wanted to. But
Oh,
once the farm was divided, he didn't want me to touch it.
Okay,
So there it is,
well,
high and mighty.
okay, well, it's all vegetated.
Oh,
I
yeah.
bet it is.
There's a lot of
It's all vegetated.
bayberries and everything else growing out of it.
Yeah, so,
Okay. 1989.
Judy, this is when Jack Ewell was chairman.
1989, that might be a record, at least during my tenure here.
I think it's one of the first two-digit order of conditions
Yeah.
that none of us have dealt with.
Right. I mean,
But anyway,
Anyway.
I can't find any record that this was ever recorded, and this is solely being done as an exercise just to kind
Sure.
of close the file, close the paperwork. You know, based on, and the address has changed. It had started off, you know, this was before the property had gotten subdivided. It started off as being 299, I think. I think I have that down here.
That's what it says on this.
Yeah, the former address was 299 Main Street. So anyway, so it's before the commission tonight to consider issuing a complete certificate of compliance. There are no ongoing conditions because I believe when the original order was issued, there was only like 2 conditions, and that was to use erosion control and to contact the commission on it.
contact the commission. 1 out of 2 is
Yeah.
not bad.
So,
And whether you used erosion control is sort of lost to history, but let's assume you did.
well, he did. I know he did in 2007 because I did an inspection of the erosion control. But I guess his best laid plans of trying to deal with the soils down there didn't go anywhere. So
All right, well, I don't think we need to be worried about it.
no.
Unless there's any questions or comments by commissioners, I need a motion to issue a complete certificate of compliance.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against?
Aye.
We need another vote. We're kind of short on our quorum tonight.
Oh, you heard about Sam.
He's stuck in, the only thing I
He's
heard.
out in Ohio.
Yeah, stuck in,
His wife ended up with an embolism
oh no, really?
Oh, no.
I didn't hear this at
No,
all.
in
anything,
the
no.
leg and in the lungs.
Oh, jeez. No, I didn't share any of those
In the
details.
hospital.
She's out there with him?
Well, they went out, he's secretary of the American Wine Society or
Right.
something. And they were out there and this all came on.
Oh,
Oh,
jeez.
that's what it's.
So you can't fly if you have an embolism, that's one thing.
That's right,
So they're kind of stuck.
yeah.
Jeez.
That's as much as I know.
That's more than.
More than I know, I just got an email saying I'm stuck in Cleveland, so I won't make the meeting.
Right. Well,
He didn't say the Western Reserve, did he?
it's in Cleveland.
Well, that's the Western Reserve.
It's not the best place.
A lot of New Englanders out there, once upon a time.
Okay, well, set.
I can go home.
You can
Go home,
You can stay.
send you a copy in the mail.
You can
You can
stay.
stay.
We got a vacancy.
I'm on 4 committees now.
No.
It's quite enough.
We'll see if you can find someone to join ours.
Yeah.
Having one.
You need one more?
We need
So
one
talk
more.
to your son.
I'll
I
tell
spoke
you.
to him the other day, because he said, he left us and said he was gonna go to southern New Hampshire or whatever, and we weren't ever gonna see him again. And then he came in the other day and said, geez, I'm doing a lot of stuff around here. And
Oh, did he?
yeah, and I asked him, I said, well, would you
He's-
consider coming
he's,
back on the commission?
Been working up on Marshall Field's granddaughter's place up in Northampton on the ocean all summer. And he's, what else is he doing? A lot of New Hampshire work, southern New Hampshire.
At the Marshall Field, the department store in Chicago came for?
Yeah, yeah. They bought Dr. Bottomley's place. Dr. Bottomley's wife was Peter Fuller's sister. And
The Fuller Estate.
put it all together. But it's all up along the coast. And another one of my clients bought, is in partnership with the guy that wrote Bonfire of the Vanities up there in Northampton.
Tom Wolfe.
Some guy named Brown.
No, Tom Wolfe was Bonfire of the Vanities. Brown is the, that I know that you mean. Yeah, that's right.
Da Vinci Code.
Da Vinci
Well, maybe
Code.
that's it.
Yeah, because he's from around these parts. He's a New Englander.
Yeah.
Tom Wolfe is a New Yorker. He wouldn't be up here.
They got 15 Persian horses up there. Black Persians, you know. And
Nice.
it's quite interesting.
It's beautiful.
That'll fix your drive.
Well, see if you can get your son to come back and join us. Not having full membership is, we barely had a quorum tonight, which if anybody else had been ill or stuck, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have, so.
Well, you got 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, we have to have 4, so. But with just one vacancy, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait till.
Oh, I'll ask him if he's,
He's already trained.
That's right. He kept his seat warm, so to speak. So I think that's who
Seat
Bob
right
Carpenter.
there.
He was right here.
Yeah, I think that's who Bob Carpenter replaced, right?
Yes, you're
Yeah.
correct.
Bob Carpenter. You mean Dr. Carpenter?
Dr. Carpenter, yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Bob.
Dr. Bob. All right, well,
Okay,
thank you.
I'm free to go.
You're free to go.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
I will.
Stopped by to see Karen O'Donnell today, and she said she already got enough signatures and put the thing through.
Yeah, what's her name, Karen Summit said there should be 4 signatures on there instead of 3.
Well, Karen was right there and she didn't
Didn't say anything.
say anything.
I know Don Hubby signed it, and I went up to sign it.
She said she had all she needed, so she must have gotten them somewhere.
Let's see.
You
What
all
else?
conducting a different committee's business on our time here.
Waiting for you.
Well, he's a member of the same committee. Oh, well. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Night.
All right, we have 3 items left. You are probably Ann Cagnon, right? Yeah, okay,
Yes.
let's do you first. The other 2 are administrative, no reason we can't do that, right?
Exactly.
Thank you.
That'd be my
I
suggestion.
appreciate that.
Sure, you're welcome.
I don't know if you remember me. I was here back in September, I think, the beginning of September, quite some time ago. I worked
August 20th to be exact.
August 20th, okay, well, there you go. So it was before September even. I am the land agent for the Northeast District of Mass Fish and Wildlife, and I had approached you back in August because there is a town-owned parcel, 29-4, I believe, on Mill Creek, that's surrounded by William Forward Wildlife Management Area.
Oh, I remember this,
And
okay.
it was
Yep.
a owner unknown parcel that the town had taken due to non-payment of taxes quite a number of years ago. And it had never, although it was entirely salt marsh, it had never been transferred to the Conservation Commission because there were some title issues. And so I approached the Conservation Commission to see if you would support Fish and Wildlife purchasing that parcel from the town because we're applying for a NACA grant in the springtime. And NACA stands for North American Wetlands Conservation Act. And so these $1 million grant applications are incredibly involved and very demanding, and one of the things we were told was that we should have 400 acres of land protected as match for this application in order to have a snowball's chance of a successful application. In addition to other projects that would be for restoration, salt marsh restoration projects. So the commission was kind enough to support that, and so subsequent to that I met with the selectmen, who also voted unanimously to support the Fish and Wildlife purchase of that parcel, and Brent had, was kind enough to attend that meeting as well and support. So when I was back at that original August meeting before the Conservation Commission, one of the other items on your agenda that evening was this Brad Street conservation restriction. And Brent had mentioned at the time that Mass Audubon would accept that grant of a CR for $18,000, I believe. I don't know if that was the exact number back then, but
Sounds right.
it was
No,
for some
yeah,
14.
1750, 17,500, we added 500 to do some survey work
Okay.
for the CPC. But yes, actually, you know, I was listening, because you raised the question the other day, I was listening to the recording I had of that meeting, and you left exactly 5 minutes before the commission voted on the motion to direct me to work on that project, just as you get directed to work on NACA grants. I got directed to work on the initiative for doing the CPC application, and then if that was successful, then moving to getting an article on town meeting, talking about funding the endowment for Mass Audubon to hold the CR and produce a baseline report and do the annual perpetual monitoring and other associated activities as needed in defense of the CR.
So, subsequent to the selectmen's meeting, I believe, I approached Brent in the parking lot and informed him that as he was aware, Fish and Wildlife was applying for this NACA grant, and that Fish and Wildlife would be interested in holding that conservation restriction on the Broad Street parcel for free. If Fish and Wildlife is interested enough in protecting a parcel and holding a conservation restriction, we don't typically charge for that privilege. Sometimes we pay for CRs, but we never charge the landowner to hold a CR. If we weren't interested in holding the CR, we just wouldn't accept it. And so at that point, Brent said, well, yeah, that makes sense for the commission to look into that, to save the town, you know, the 17 or 18,000, whatever the magic number is, to use towards another project. And unfortunately, I think at some point there was a breakdown in communication. So I was not aware that Brent had already been directed to definitely go with Mass Audubon. I never understood that that there was no desire to look into Fish and Wildlife, or even if that is indeed the case. I don't know if the commission as a whole ever discussed the option of a CR that didn't cost the town, but here we are at this point, and the situation is that Mass Audubon, I just talked to Bob Ford today and explained the situation, that I had been working diligently on pursuing this CR to the point where Brent and I had discussed some of the details of what the commission would like to see in the CR, what you would not allow and wouldn't allow, that kind of thing. And Bob said, well, it's, you know, I'm not driving this bus, so to speak, that who the town or the Conservation Commission grants the CR to is entirely up to the town, as it should be. So I thought perhaps that one factor that the commission had probably considered was the fact that you hadn't dealt with a Fish and Wildlife conservation restriction in the past, and so maybe you weren't sure if we did this thing on a regular basis, or you know, if we were equipped to handle it, etc. So just today, as a matter of fact, Brent had sent me an email asking, do you have an example of a baseline documentation report that you've done for another CR? Do you have any additional information you can provide to the Conservation Commission? So I do indeed have that. So here, I couldn't email you the document because as you can see, it's kind of a book. So I would request that I could maybe lend this to you and get it back, because you know it is a lot of paper. So maybe you could keep it for you know, a few weeks and.
Well, and you know, just to let the commission know, so what Ann shared with me via email today is she did share that they go by EOEEA's restriction baseline documentation report specifications, or to shorten it up, their baseline specs of EEA. Okay, so that is certainly a good, yes.
Okay, so you printed out.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what that is. Yep. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, because they hadn't shared that with me since I saw that it had a May 2013.
Well, we helped write it. We helped draft it. So
well, right,
it took,
but they
took
hadn't.
quite some time to.
But Irene Delbono, even though we were working on another, I didn't know this existed. I was still, I think the last revision that was posted on the website, I think was 2008, revised from 2006.
And I wasn't sure, to be honest, I wasn't sure if this was an in-house document. I mean, I knew it's open, everything that we do is open to the public, but I didn't know if maybe this was what we do as state agencies. In other words, DCR, Department of Ag, Fish and Wildlife. And I wasn't sure if Irene Delbono required that for all.
Yeah, it's
So
hard.
that's something to get, for you guys to ask her, that she might not have shared it with you because it wasn't, you know, maybe you're not held to that standard. Just a thought.
It may not be,
Just a thought.
but again, the familiarity, you know, again, just to let the commission know, the familiarity with Mass Audubon and doing baseline reports was very shortly after I started with the town, where DCR had contracted with Mass Audubon to provide a baseline documentation report on the Pingree Farm Conservation Open Space that's right adjacent to where the filtration plant construction is happening today. So on the the western side of the Mill River towards the Georgetown Raleigh State Forest. So that's actually where I first came into contact with actually doing the on-the-ground work, because they actually invited me. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but actually he had a lot of, I believe served on our open
Jeff
space
Collins?
committee.
Oh.
No, before.
Well, at any rate,
Yeah,
so in addition, this is a monitoring inspection form that Fish and Wildlife has developed for our properties. So the baseline documentation report is done when the project is first acquired, when the property is first acquired, and the idea behind that is to make sure that there's a baseline, so that if we go out a year from now or 6 months from now and there's some additional clearing or some dumping or an additional trail or a shed or something like that, and we say, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't here, and then either the landowner or the abutter says, oh no, that's been there all along, we can whip out this document and say, no, really, it wasn't here when we first acquired. So it's an enforcement tool, basically.
How often do you make those reviews, and are they, is there a procedure, a protocol, a policy with regard to annual,
Annual,
walk
yeah.
the properties?
Yeah, that's what that form is, yeah, that's our annual form. So once the baseline documentation report is done, that big tome, then you can go, once you've documented that everything is okay, you can go once a year with this shorter 2-page form, contact the landowner, go out with them or without them, as the case may be, and just check and make sure nothing new has happened, so to speak.
So what I don't know what the right term is, department within your department, what section of your department's responsible for this? Is there a specific?
We're in the process of evaluating whether we need to make a new department. Right now, each district reviews their own CRs.
Okay, so it's at the moment it's at
So we're familiar with our own properties.
district level.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It would essentially be like Brent going out and reviewing the CRs
Sure,
that
yeah.
you hold.
How many districts do you have?
The state has 5.
So like northeast, south,
Yeah, this is
southeast.
Northeast District,
Yeah.
right?
Do they
Yeah,
have a,
northeast, southeast, central, Connecticut River Valley, and western. Yep. So,
do they
and
have,
I've also drafted the CR, not realizing that you guys are
Sure.
moving ahead
Well,
with
it
Minnesota.
just,
so.
that's why we invited you here, because we realized that you put some effort in. Obviously, from our perspective, saving money is better than spending money if we're getting the same desired results, the same quality and timeliness and so forth. It's certainly worth considering.
So it's entirely up to you, the commission, as to whether you want to go with Mass Audubon or Fish and Wildlife. As I said, I discussed this with Bob Ford today because, all our conservation organizations work together on a regular basis. So, we're all on the same team, so to speak. If it turned out that you decided to go forward with Mass Audubon at this point, I would request maybe that you consider suggesting or recommending or asking Mass Audubon to allow Fish and Wildlife to use the Brad Street CR as match for NACA. For this NACA grant application. I already discussed this with Bob Ford from Mass Audubon today on the phone, and he said that seems like a perfectly reasonable
So
request.
that's something you can do under the knockout.
Yeah, it
provisions.
doesn't have to be held by us.
Okay.
It can be held by another organization as long as they can't count it twice, basically.
Sure.
So if they allowed Fish and Wildlife to use this 100 acres as match, they wouldn't be able to use it for their own application next year or, or the year after. I also had a meeting this morning with trustees of reservations, and they've graciously, it looks like they're working towards allowing us to use 300 acres as match. So this 100-acre CR that I've been working on would be really critical to getting us to that 400-acre magic number.
But this isn't 100 acres of salt marsh.
No, it's 100 acres of protected land.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were
And
talking
so
before
they're
about
looking
salt
at-
marsh, so,
no,
okay,
They're
sorry.
looking at not only salt marsh, but upland coastal
Oh, okay.
forest that directly abuts that salt marsh, because as we
Okay.
know,
Yeah. It's all
climate
related,
change and et
This,
cetera.
this other one is also.
That other one is
Kind
also.
of, or at least pretty close.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, we have other acreage that we're, could we offer that up as well, in terms of stuff that's already protected
Well, there's another letter here that
in support?
that came through us to the email tonight, which I haven't distributed to the commission because I didn't want to start getting too confused on various
Yeah, let's talk
topics,
about this one
so,
first,
yeah.
but before I leave tonight, I would like to discuss that.
Okay, yeah, well, that's
question
why I've got
that's
it right
gonna
here, so I wouldn't forget it, so.
So I just want to make sure that I've covered everything. It's,
Tell me a little bit about NACA. It's not a law I've heard of. I'm not aware of it. How long has it been the law of the land and?
it's been a program.
Administered by whom?
It's the federal government,
Yeah, which department though? The Department of
Department of Interior, I
Interior,
believe.
and through which agency? Don't know if it's-
U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Okay.
Mhm. And it's the North American Wetland Conservation Act, as I said, but for some reason, it's geared towards waterfowl. That's the first and primary goal of protection. for them.
Waterfowl? Is that what you're saying?
Waterfowl, yeah. So basically ducks.
That's
And then-
because all the conservative Republicans like to hunt.
It kind of seems that way, but I don't,
Well,
the
you
good
take your-
news,
You take your friends wherever you can find them.
the good news is exactly
Depending on
that
who you're hunting with, is sort of that they shoot you.
that in protecting this waterfowl habitat,
Yeah.
they also end up protecting habitat for many other species,
Of course, yeah.
including,
Yeah.
rare species and shorebirds, even though not many people shoot shorebirds anymore, that, they're also on their list of, high points, et
Probably
cetera.
some they should, like seagulls and geese, but anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So,
That leads me into a question, if I may interrupt for a second.
Sure.
Does, if we decided to straight out go with, or try to reverse the process and change the votes and go with Fish and Game here, does that, I guess I understand that would mean that you permit hunting on this property, or would?
Correct.
As part of the conservation restriction
Mhm.
language, and it's not clear to me that would happen under the Audubon.
I checked with Bob Ford on that issue today when we were discussing, well, how do you feel about this? Or, would you mind if the town, gave the CR to Fish and Wildlife? And if you, Mass Audubon, ended up accepting the CR, would you allow us to use it as NACA match? And Bob Ford actually asked, well, what are the NACA requirements? Would you be allowed to use it for match? Is there anything that, that the town is doing that would not be allowed, under NACA, that would discount it from being used as match? And I said no. As a matter of fact, Brent and I had gone over, whether forestry would be allowed, whether haying, salt marsh haying would be allowed, hunting, et cetera. And he seemed to indicate that would not necessarily, be prohibited. And so under NACA, they give more points if land is open to the public completely and if hunting is allowed. So I did check with Bob Ford, is that something that Mass Audubon would feel comfortable with, that could live with? And he said, yes, absolutely, that Mass Audubon has many conservation restrictions where hunting is allowed. They view conservation restrictions differently than their fee sanctuaries.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's obvious because of the safety concerns of the incompatibility with hunting and them encouraging passive use of their trails that go through wooded areas. At least that's what we ran into at Rough Meadows when we worked on the conservation restriction there. There was a distinction made between hunting deer, mammals, and duck hunting out in the salt marsh, and that was because the duck hunting out in the salt marsh wasn't viewed as being in close proximity, posing a risk to the utilization of the trails they had going through the oak forest.
And it's more open, you can see if, you're gonna accidentally shoot somebody,
Yeah.
typically, that kind of thing.
Second question is, if we go this route, does that require an act of the legislature to approve?
No, I did check, as I said, we've done quite a bit of work on this, and so the first issue for me was Article 97.
Right.
Because it's already under the care, custody, and control of conservation, my first thought was that we would need to have an act of the legislature. Because the commission, although you would keep the property in fee, you would be divesting yourself of
A portion
The
of
right.
it. Portion.
Yeah.
right,
You're giving away some rights, or
Exactly.
or restricting some rights, however you want to
Yeah,
view.
even though it would be more restrictive as far
Right.
as Article 97 goes, Article 97 as it's currently written doesn't have that exception, Well, if you're making it more restrictive, you don't have to come back, to us. That's not the way it works. However, Judy Pickett, who's town council, Irene Del Bono, who does, approves all the CRs in the state that aren't done by a state agency, have both agreed that Article 97 legislation would not be required for this particular parcel, and the reason is because it was acquired with CPA funds. That the Community Preservation Act law actually requires that conservation restriction get put on this property.
Mm-hmm.
And so they consider that the quote-unquote acquisition isn't complete until that CR is done.
Interesting.
So, legally, whether, that is okay or not, I think some attorneys could agree to disagree, to be on the safe side. Maybe you should get Article 97 legislation.
Yeah,
But
Well,
town council
if
says
I
it's
recall-
not necessary,
I was going
so.
to say, if I recall, having seen Irene's original email response, I believe, to Judy and you in regards to that, was that she said she specifically was part of the CPA revision committee that had worked to
Rewrote the
make-
law. Yeah.
rewrote the law to make it explicit that a CR was in fact the expectation and part of the whole overall CPA acquisition process.
If she.
Unfortunately, they didn't put a timetable on it.
Right.
Really, they should, if they wanted to be good lawyers, they should have said, and if you don't get it done within X number of months or a year, we take the money back. And then I'll guarantee every town would make sure that those CRs were done quickly. But I also understand in her regard, in her defense, I understand that many towns have a hard time getting an organization to hold the CR because although you have, multiple choices in this neck of the woods, out in Western Mass, there aren't as many land trusts, there aren't as many holdings, so it might be more difficult for a town to actually find another entity to hold the CR.
In all frankness, assuming such a hypothetical one-year limit, getting those reviewed and approved through the state. There are huge delays historically associated with that.
Yeah, that is, I know that has been an issue and for some towns.
Timing's everything.
One of the things with getting a conservation restriction, giving a conservation restriction to Fish and Wildlife, we don't go through Arvine Del Bono. So if it's a state agent, if it's a CR to a state agency like DCR or Department of Ag or DCR, those don't have to go through that same approval process. So.
Who does approve? Fish and Game?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That being said, as I said, as far as I'm concerned, as long as the land is protected, it would be really fantastic if we could use it as NARCA grant, whether we hold the CR or Mass Audubon. Also because these NARCA grants are very incredibly detailed, and you think this is bad. That's like nothing compared to what's required. They need to know how many, nesting pairs of thoughts that could possibly use that particular habitat. How you figure out how many couples are in the marsh is beyond me, but we have to kind of document that kind of thing. And so, I've already started doing some of that work as to how many acres is salt marsh, how many is coastal forest, etc. So even if Mass Audubon owns it, if we could use it as match, that would be great. And I also wanted to make sure that the commission understood that Fish and Wildlife does this kind of thing on a regular basis. So if in the future you have another project that you're considering, that's not to say that we accept every CR. As an agency, we're getting much more critical about understanding that it does put a burden on us to have to do these baseline documentation reports and go out on a yearly basis. So we don't necessarily accept every CR that's offered to us. But certainly if the habitat is worthy, we're interested. And if for some reason we can't accept it, we would be glad to help you find, Essex County Greenbelt or some other organization that would be more appropriate.
Okay, other questions by commissioners for Ann? Brent, there was a second parcel or a second letter?
Yes, so.
Another topic?
So
Same topic.
It's very,
Well, yeah, I mean, it actually goes back to the
original
salt
reason.
marsh, the original, effort.
And,
Oh, you mean this salt marsh?
yeah,
Actually, there's another salt marsh parcel in the town.
it goes back to
That's
the
currently that
NARCA
was in
grant,
tax
basically.
title taking.
So the parcel that letter is about is this one right here. Which is also right next to a river, but instead of being the Mill River, this is the
That's
the Rowley
the
River.
Rowley River coming
Rowley.
in, yeah.
And this blue is federal land.
Yeah,
And
okay,
I think in the corner down here is Broad Street. That's the Broad Street parcel. So, as you may recall, there were some title issues on that Picnic Point parcel on the Mill Creek, Mill River.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an owner unknown parcel that was taken for non-payment of taxes. And when it was discovered that there was some strangeness with that title in reference to the map and parcels, I said, well, gee, while I'm at it, maybe there's some other salt marsh land that I can approach the town at the same time. So lo and behold, I found this particular parcel, which is map 37, parcel 25, also on a river, also entirely salt marsh, and so therefore over the years the owner became unknown, and it was taken at the same time as that other parcel. So I approached Brent and Judy Pickett as well and said, well, how about this one too while we're at it? And lo and behold, it has the same title issues of map and parcel changes. So when I brought this before my land committee, they said, well, gee, we're gonna be spending a lot of time and effort on this title issue. If we can even resolve it, it makes sense to acquire the Mill Creek parcel because it's surrounded by fish and wildlife land. This one, while we understand it would be a good knocker grant match, yeah, we don't need to be spending money to resolve other people's title issues. Here's the deal, if the town wants to grant it to you as a gift, to Fish and Wildlife as a gift, then we'll allow you to spend money on trying to resolve the title issues. So we would purchase, right now, the selectmen have already voted to allow us to
On the
purchase
first one.
the Mill Creek parcel. I have not approached them about this one yet, because I figured I'd do the same thing, I'd go to the Conservation Commission first, see if you would support the acquisition. This one would be a little different in that it would be a gift as opposed to a purchase.
Well, I can't imagine why we wouldn't support one if we supported the other. The question of the price is for the selectmen to decide, not us, and that's
Right.
really up to them, it's town property, so.
Okay,
But
so-
if it's
We had,
100%.
and we had a little introduction to this because when the first time we got wind of those monitoring stations by Marine Biological Labs being erected in the salt marsh, they thought that there was a possibility of them erecting one of their monitoring stations on this particular
Is that what it is?
parcel.
Okay.
So,
Oh, and was it?
no,
Oh, okay.
It was
So
close.
no.
Is it on
But they had gotten permission for it, but then they decided and picked some different locations. But that's, at least when I first became aware that there was this quote-unquote municipally owned parcel out there, but found out that, yeah, it wasn't real clear about, I mean, we were discussing earlier in a different situation about the lack of definitive surveys of properties out there. This one definitely suffers from the lack of definitive surveys. On the other hand, one can understand when one looks at the water channels out there, it's almost totally cut off from the rest of the salt marsh by creeks or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it.
Right.
They actually define it, so it's entirely possible that no one really thought they could use it that well because they couldn't really get to it by even going across the marsh at low
Right.
tide. They always had to use a boat somehow to access it, so it's entirely possible that it's sort of been owner unknown for ever since the king chartered a boat to come over here.
Yeah, or at least for quite some time.
Well, they put a a lot and parcel number on it at some point, so to that extent.
Yeah,
They knew it was
well,
there.
we wouldn't be having this discussion though if they'd been a little bit careful when they did the tax title takings and really checked the assessor's map and parcels, since that appears to be what's gotten us into the
Right.
trouble with the takings, is that they apparently weren't too diligent in what they put down. And that's the only reference they made. If they had even at least given us a hint by saying, borders on a certain
But-
creek or
North
something,
of such and
that's,
such, or,
that's
yeah.
what the whole problem with the taking is. It's
Right.
kind of like, when they didn't get the assessor's designation right, there was no fallback position.
Right.
Like we at least talk about whatever the nearest town road is, when we talk about
Yep.
land off of something, we at least,
Or the nearest established creek.
yeah,
North of
we
Mud
give it
Creek.
some type of location that will at least let you get there, but the tax title takings are always, once they got the parcel or the map numbers wrong, I think it was mostly parcel number, appears to be incorrect, it just threw us for a loop.
Speaking of parcel numbers and their correctness, in your letter,
Don't have the wrong one.
the three circled in red seem to be the same thing, but one of them is designated as with a different number than the.
Oh, this one is a typo, yes, you're right. Because the other one's a 3725, 3725, and these two were about a different parcel.
Right,
Because these are the Mill Creek ones.
so that should say
so this is
37,
the
not
one.
35.
Right, this is
Right.
the one typo, sorry, I apologize for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Because map 35 wouldn't even be right around there. Wouldn't be
Right.
right there, yeah. Well, I mean, as I say, I can't, if this is entirely salt marsh with the same ownership or lack of ownership, I don't know how, as a Conservation Commission, we wouldn't support it, other than the suggestions or comments. I think the decision belongs to a different board.
Absolutely, but I figured that as Salt Marsh, they were gonna look to you
Oh, yeah.
for your
No,
input, so
Correct,
I
makes
figured,
sense. Yeah.
just like last time, I'd start with you guys and work up.
Right.
No, you're right.
And in this situation, Fish and Game brings to the table more resources devoted to protecting it and managing it, since they're willing to go to that effort, where we were a little bit stymied by the fact that we can't do much about
No, we're-
trying to survey things, and can't do much about doing title searches and
It's not really our role.
resolving those issues.
That's
Right.
right.
Well, we also don't have the funding for doing that
That's right.
without going to town meeting.
Yeah. Well, I think if we could take we could express our support for the concept in a resolution, a vote? I don't know what we would need to do. It's a pretty
You directed me to
informal
send a letter to the selectmen,
Yeah,
and last
that might
time
be
I
good.
went and attended the hearing also to buttress the support for this effort to protect those parcels, so we can do the same if you so desire.
Yeah, is that the sense of the commission, or the 4 members present?
Now, which parcel are we talking about?
3725,
Yes.
3725.
Yeah.
Because we've already done it for 29-4,
Mhm.
right?
Correct.
Is that
I support
unanimous?
that.
All right. And then I think we can direct you to do that, Brent, either by your presence or by letter.
Very
And
confused.
you have our support for that.
Well, thank you very much. Did you have a question as to where the parcel was located, or?
Me,
Yeah,
no,
no, okay, great.
no. It's
So,
just become very convoluted, it
Yeah.
seems.
Okay, so.
Yeah, you think the tax collector just taking property, you think that'd be pretty easy, wouldn't it?
So, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and
Well,
consideration.
we
and
appreciate you
support.
coming.
Yeah.
You've certainly enlightened us considerably about what the role of your agency is in this. It's all stuff I didn't know. I wasn't aware that your agency, it is Fish and Wildlife, right? Even
Well,
though
there's
some of your
actually,
letterhead-
so the deal is that there's a Department of Fish and Game.
Okay,
And with, underneath the department is the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. I think back when Romney was around, they somehow changed the names, and I don't understand, quite frankly, but,
so as of today, you're Fish and Game,
well, actually.
but your Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
Yeah, I am hired by the Department of Fish and Game, so technically I am a department employee. However, I work out of the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife Northeast District. I think the way I look at it is, I think the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife is more the stewards. So they're the ones that actually develop regulations, maintain properties, put up signage, etc. But the department is the umbrella organization that kind of funds the work.
Okay.
Who's the commissioner of Department of Fish and Game?
The commissioner is
Whatever the
Mary Griffin.
Title is.
Yeah, she's the commissioner, and the director of Fisheries and Wildlife is Wayne McCullum. And we are one of 2 agencies in the entire state that I'm aware of, that has a separate autonomous board of directors. So Division of Fisheries and Wildlife has a board of directors who appoints the director, Wayne McCullum, and so he's somewhat insulated politically. So when there's a new governor, he doesn't necessarily get kicked out. He's been around for 20+ years.
That's interesting.
The
Glad you mentioned that.
commissioner is
The
appointed
governor
by the
appointed,
governor, however.
right.
So sometimes commissioners stay if they're doing a good job and they don't rock the boat or whatever.
Right.
But they don't necessarily stay around as long.
Your board of directors, how many are there, and are they public or private people or a combination?
They're private people, as far as I'm aware of, and there is a whole matrix as to who they are. So there's a scientific person, there's an agricultural representative, there's And there's also different regions of the state that are represented. So the regional person here is Fred Winthrop. I don't know if you know him. He lives in Ipswich. Famous person. He's worked for many years for the trustees of reservations.
I guess before she leaves, I got another question, and that is getting back to the Bradstreet situation. Do we want to consider authorizing Brent as well to engage in a discussion with the selectmen to indicate that because of timing problems and everything else, that it now appears that it is possible to have a fairly equivalent preservation restriction at no cost through Fish and Game, and do they want to take or take no action on the vote of the town meeting to go ahead with the Audubon situation?
Well, on that, I've talked to Brent a little bit about this over the weekend when this issue arose, and in fact, I think Brent put a call in to Debbie today, which unfortunately they did not connect, because that was my suggestion, was to get Debbie, our administrative assistant to the selectmen, involved in this discussion so she could keep them informed. And I think that would be a good way to approach it for the time being, is to approach her, inform her about these discussions in this meeting, make sure the selectmen are all aware that this is going on, and have a chance to weigh in with us if they have any concerns about it. My understanding of the vote at town meeting was to authorize us, but not require us to sign a CR with Audubon, and to authorize funding for that.
Mm-hmm.
But we're free to not do that. We'd have to rescind the vote in order to account for the money, I would suppose. But we don't have to.
Well, not
spend the-
specifically in terms of we don't need a town meeting article to do that. I believe we would simply inform the CPC
Right.
committee that we are not moving ahead and therefore will not be utilizing
Yes.
X
Okay.
amount of dollars that were authorized.
Right, but if we didn't want that authorization to be hanging out there indefinitely, perhaps, but in any event, we don't have to get town meeting permission to not spend the money,
Correct.
or to not hire Audubon for this role. But I think your point of, we really need to make sure the selectmen are fully informed about this, I think that's absolutely true. This is, very much part of their purview. Does that seem like a reasonable way to approach it for now?
Well, it is, and I mean, it sounds like a good idea that they didn't touch base today, because I think this is, at least to me, some additional and new information.
Right.
And some assurances that I'm more comfortable with than I was before. My sense is that there would have to be, it doesn't matter with regard to if they decide if the selectmen decide to switch horses here and go with Fish and Game, I don't think that would stand in the way of, once that became known and passed along to you folks, that would stand in the way of your proceeding, but I do think it would take another town meeting vote to rescind the vote, because I think that gets put into the books and the records, and there would have to be it's already part of the CPA accounting, I'm sure.
Yeah, it might also just be good from a transparency point of view. The town meeting
Well, we asked-
eventually decides about.
We sort of
spending.
covered this, not quite asking it the same way, we sort of covered this when we sought guidance from Judy Pickett in regards to whether that article was not just authoritative, but rather it was also directive, is how she put it. And
Right.
she said, no, just like the first article mentioned a CR with DCR. And that was aborted by the selectmen, and there was no then article
Oh,
put
okay.
back on the next town meeting warrant to quote-unquote cover that, again, because, I believe it's because the interpretation is that it just authorizes the board to act if they so choose. It does not direct the board to specifically
Okay.
engage in that action. It just gives you the authority to make the decision if you so choose.
Well,
And I asked about, and again, I asked before Laura Hamilton left the town's employ while she was working for the CPC committee. I asked her, well, what happens if we choose not to take advantage of the authorization to spend these funds? And said, well, she said, you just have to inform the committee so that we can just put it back into our accounting system, that it's then available for other projects to apply for.
One
That's
thing
not
I
that
did,
easy.
did
Comes
want to,
back through channels.
Well, I'm sure there are channels, but I mean, she said there wasn't other hoops or whatever
No, that's right.
to go through.
if I may,
Mm.
one other issue that I'd like to point out to you is that there's a community garden on a portion of this property, and that would be considered a separate area. So the conservation restriction that's drafted before you here basically says you can't do all this stuff. And then there's another section that says, well, but you can do X, Y, Z, and that community garden area would be held to a different standard, because you do want to allow agricultural stuff to, and more intensive use in that one little section, not the remainder of the CR. So Brett, when we had been going over these details, had indicated that you wanted to keep the ability to pipe water in the future at some point, maybe from the recreational parcel.
Not only that, it goes beyond that. There's also another farm pond, exactly like the one very close on the Brad Street property that Mr. Todd was talking about before, and we were talking about. And one of the proposals is that there be at least seasonal piping of water out of that farm pond to the community garden. There is a possibility of tying it into the rec parcel, as you suggested. There's also the possibility of drilling a well within the envelope of the community garden, and it'd be nice to have all options open for pursuing that, because it's still up in the air and hasn't been decided how they're going to get the water.
Okay, well, I wasn't privy to the other options, so clearly.
Well,
the commission-
we haven't actually seen a proposal for the other options, so, other than there's been some talk about it, but
Yeah.
it's
But
all
a CR
brainstorming.
like this is a permanent thing, and it's a dickens to change it afterwards. So you're absolutely right to bring up, if there's
Right.
any possibility that you might want to consider doing something like that, then now's the time to put it in the CR, as
Well,
opposed
It
to
would be good.
changing it later.
Yeah, and because we hadn't, and because we hadn't gotten to the point of actually, or I hadn't seen a directive vote from the commission in regards to who to proceed with the actual crafting of the CR, et cetera, because the commission does that process within our open meetings.
Mhm.
So what we've discussed so far was just tentative discussions
Absolutely,
that I
absolutely.
have with anybody, just so, you know.
But the reason I bring that up is because when we were discussing, you had mentioned that the community garden area might change slightly, that they.
Well, the commission has allowed it to expand
So.
from where it was originally designated to be put, although it turns out that original designation wasn't meant to be any type of, we can find no record that it was meant to be a permanent restriction on the size of the area devoted to community gardening.
Okay.
Because that discussion was never held with the commission, which, once
so the-
once the property came to the custody and care of the Conservation Commission, the venue and forum to have a discussion about whether it had certain dimensional bounds or restrictions needed to take place with this committee, and that had never happened except for a request that came in when they actually asked to create more plots, which the commission did allow.
So,
Reason-
as part of the CR document, whether it comes to Fish and Wildlife or it goes to Mass Audubon, I'm sure Mass Audubon would also want some concrete in the field and on a plan
Right.
designation of this is the community garden envelope, and it shouldn't necessarily.
Oh, and that's perfectly reasonable, and that actually would, I mean, I would be advising that to the commission also, just from the nature of the terrain and the restrictions that so far they've maintained their activity and what had previously been hay field.
Mhm. Well, I bring that up in regards to the money discussion, because if you have to do some sort of survey to figure out, you know, where the community garden area is gonna be now, as opposed to where it was originally shown on a plan, then you might wanna hold back from saying, we're giving all the money back. You know what I'm saying? Cause I don't know if originally you were
Oh, I see your point.
envisioning
Good
using some
point.
of that money for that purpose, or
If we-
not.
If
but-
we need a better description in order to grant the CR, then CPC money is gonna have to be the source of it. Have to be the.
If funds were needed, I
Yeah.
mean, that, again.
That would be the question.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, because we're trying to divide uses out here.
Mhm.
And an ECP is gonna have to, an ECR is going to have a precise description.
Exactly, so I just point that out to you guys in case you hadn't thought
Good, no,
about
it's
it.
a good
Well, it'd
point.
be helpful in that context, if the language, I don't think necessarily has to be that descriptive in all areas, that if there are water possibilities in terms of utilization for the gardens, and if those options vary from a well in the ground, which gets very expensive, to using seasonal piping from the farm pond, which cuts across the open acreage to get to that farm pond, or to access across the rec parcel, that I think there could be some general language in there permitting that without being overly specific as to where the pipe gets laid or where it comes from.
Absolutely. In fact, the way I have it drafted now, because the only suggestion that Brent had made was the rec parcel, I just said that, you know, that you're retaining the right to pipe water from that potential parcel. And I didn't say anything about size of pipe or how the pipe was put or where or whatever.
Right, or whether it's laid on top or underneath the ground.
Right. And I certainly didn't mention anything about the farm pond. I could imagine someone at Fish and Wildlife or Mass Audubon or whoever the CR holder is saying, well, we need some sort of restriction, so
I was
you
gonna say,
can't,
I'm not sure the
you
farm.
can't leave it completely
Not
up in
sure
the
the
air.
farm
So,
pond
for
idea
instance,
is
if you
viable.
pipe to the farm pond, they might
Cheapest.
say, don't drain it completely
What's
down.
only cheapest is somebody else that takes care of powering it and the infrastructure needed to pull that water all the way up that hill.
Well, that's the concern I have, is it's lower than the community garden.
Right,
It kind of
and
makes
what
a
are they gonna
difference.
do, build a generator pad and stuff down there? I mean, come
just-
on.
Yeah.
It's-
There are pumps that pump uphill.
I know there are
Yes,
pumps that
My
pump
septic
uphill, they're
system
set on
But it's
on
not-
concrete pads with
Right,
propane
they need
tanks.
power.
Yeah.
This is not an artesian farm pond.
One of the reasons that the commission is not plugged into what I've been talking about is because I represent the commission as a member of the Community Preservation Act
Right.
Committee, and
They're
the
much more
funding,
informed.
and the funding grants for these kinds of things tend to come from the community garden folks, and/or the Open Space Committee, which is a subcommittee of this committee, the Conservation Commission, and those kinds of discussions about water sourcing have come up without the knowledgeability of this group. Now, setting all that discussion aside, in terms of you're approaching the selectmen with regard to the Brad Street situation and who holds the CR, I think it's important that you keep your $500 outside of that and make it clear to Debbie that we're just talking about the 17.5 and not the 18.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good point. Right, because it's already segregated.
And it's already
Right.
been authorized through town meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right, and I think we've kept you here long enough.
Okay, well, thank you very much
Well,
for the
thank
time,
you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for
And,
coming.
And thank you, Brent, for giving me the heads up.
Okay.
Appreciate all the work that went into all this.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We do. Have a great day. Thank you for all your work too, for that matter.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night. Hi, Beverly. We still have 2 messages.
Yeah.
What's the 855 item? Is that just a partial release for one of the lots? Is there anything at all complicated about it? I don't think I've heard anything.
No, there's nothing complicated at all because there's absolutely nothing has been built on the lot and the commission does not have any regulated areas subject to the order of conditions on the lot, nor is there any drainage or stormwater infrastructure on the lot.
Well, that's about as simple as it gets.
Yeah,
Basically, we have to we have to release something from our jurisdiction that was never in it in the first place. That's not too hard to worry.
yeah, and
It's more difficult to describe
That's right.
because there's really nothing applicable.
yeah, I was, you know, I offered to
Yeah.
in a lot of in some other lots on the same development, I've given them the option of I can write a letter and tell you that there's nothing there subject to the order of conditions.
But this
Or you, in this case, they wanted to submit
Particular
a partial
lawyer wants an
certificate of
actual partial
compliance.
certificate. Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's vote to give them one.
So
Do I have a motion to issue a partial certificate of compliance for, what is it, 54?
54 Wild Pasture Lane,
Map 23,
lot
parcel
13.
19, lot 13.
So
Is there a
moved.
motion? There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against? Just think of all the additional paper this generates.
And they gotta go record it.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that
4 more pages here,
she's-
4 more pages in our file, the lawyer's file. Then it gets recorded, then it gets microfilmed and photographed, and stored again in somebody's file.
Okay.
Good thing trees are marked as renewable resource.
What entertainer said, give them what they want.
Like fracking so that we can make more microphones.
Sorry, I lost you there.
That's on its microphone.
Oh, yeah.
I guess these things, all those.
All right. That brings us to the 845 item, which is denominated offer of land for purchase to town, 710 Haverhill Street, map 5, parcel 9, lot A, Mr. John Breen, owner.
Not had any subsequent communications from Mr. Breen, but I believe the last
I
email.
think we sent him a letter, right?
Yeah. I believe his response to
Did he?
me- He said, I'm out of town till the 18th. I will further discuss on my return.
Okay, so we'll just, this is just administrative, so we can put it on the agenda for our next meeting and see what further discussion. Just to bring everyone up to date, the question was presented to town council.
Town council?
And Judy Pickett looked it over and said, well, if there's a recorded plan that says of this parcel, quote, to be conveyed to the Conservation Commission, then he is under an obligation to have conveyed it to us, so we would accept his compliance with his requirement, if that's what he wished to do. So we wrote to him and said, we will accept your,
Let me read it.
yeah,
So, dear Mr. Breen, the Raleigh Conservation Commission met at a public meeting on October 22nd to consider your emailed land offer of October 3rd. The commission's agent, Brent Bazelak, was instructed to consult with town council Judith Pickett. I have herein attached for your review town council's October 30th, 2013 memo regarding 710 Haverhill Street. The Raleigh Conservation Commission has been made aware of the recorded approved subdivision plans of the Ashley Road definitive subdivision and respectfully request that the conveyance of the open space parcel A be finalized. The recorded plans at the Registry of Deeds, Essex South District, clearly support that conveying the parcel to the commission was intended. If you will complete the responsibility of conveying the parcel Lot A, the Raleigh Conservation Commission will offer to assume the responsibility of title search and recordation of the deed documents. The commission looks forward to your response.
So we shall see. But town council did not think that we should buy it.
Right, if the intent was to offer it
I mean,
to us.
Yeah.
it's not just that it's the intent, it's that it's written on a recorded plan.
Well,
So,
That was all signed off on by the planning board.
and by Mr. Breen,
So,
Mr. and Mrs. Breen, I think it was.
there's some miscommunication somewhere.
Yeah, or,
Well, there's notes in the commission's files that around that time period that indicate that he had started the process, but it was subsequently halted when the Conservation Commission discovered that there were back taxes owed on the parcel. And apparently, Mr. Breen was trying to make the commission responsible for that, and the commission said, no, you're not going to be responsible for the back taxes. You need to resolve whatever issue with the treasurer's office, and then, in other words, clear title.
Right.
Clear conveyance, I guess, maybe that would be a better phrase.
Also, totally unbuildable land.
Well, and there's no quibbles about that, and even prior to the Ashley Road thing from Bradford Realty Trust, I think it was, who developed the Ice Pond subdivision, it was designated as a drainage, easement from back on their original plans, apparently, when they created those lots.
The drains do go in there from those lots.
all right, so we won't discuss it further at our December 3rd meeting. I don't think I need a motion to continue because it's just administratives.
Correct.
All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda now. We took up a couple of administrative things. Is there anything else we need to take on?
Well, how do we stand with the Bradstreet Farm CR?
It might,
Because if I go to the, well, I mean, am I going to the select, is the commission asking for the selectmen's guidance in making a decision here, or, yeah, how do I approach this situation, because I'm a little bit confused
I
on.
think the way I'd be interested to hear anybody else's views on this. The way I would look at it is I wouldn't want to make the decision with the selectmen not having been fully informed before we decide it. I think that would be discourteous if nothing else. So since they aren't fully informed, I don't think we should make a decision. So I think in order, we need to inform them.
So I should present to them
Yes.
that the commission is facing what appears to be two equally qualified amenities to consider holding the CR, and
And that there's an opportunity
Tell
to
them.
save the town $17,500 that has been gone through channels because of timeframes
right.
and voted at town meeting to change direction and to go directly with Fish and Game, although Fish and Game people have indicated that if the town prefers to continue with Audubon as voted, that the same supportive effect via Audubon supporting this matcha grant or whatever it's called would serve Fish and Game's purposes, which is why they originally wanted to do this, to see whole.
Right, the end result is the land would be protected, and that still ends up being what the final goal is.
And I think all of us have the sense that this is a pretty professional operation in this regard. It's something they've done before. They're quite familiar with it. I'm sure you'll take a look at their baseline report, but it's the right thickness for a baseline report. I think we can agree on that, which is
And we wouldn't have it in front of us unless it was a complete document.
Right.
Right.
And just the general presentation, that,
Right.
you know, gave us some confidence that these folks do know what they're doing and would do it correctly.
Well,
So, and then the other thought I had is we're barely a quorum here. I would think that a vote to change direction like that might be better made with more members present.
I
Just
agree.
by more diversity of opinion, and so we can get the selectmen's feedback via Debbie on that. And I
Okay.
suppose if the selectmen are confused by it and want you to go to a meeting, that's, or want one of us to come to the meeting,
well, you know,
do that too.
just to make sure that everything's adequately stated here, because, you know, and I was surprised what, there were some comments made to me that, you know, precipitated my specifically seeking as to when the commission specifically voted on a motion to direct me to do this, and I was very surprised to find that it happened to be the exact same meeting previously that Ms. Gagnon was in attendance and had actually had a conversation with the commission about the selection of Mass Audubon and about when I was directly seeking guidance from the commission, because I don't like to start working on a project unless I'm specifically given some guidance to do it. And when it was clearly motioned and voted on that I was to pursue the application to the CPC committee for Mass Audubon holding a CR and us obtaining authorization for funding to meet the requirement of their endowment.
What was the date of that meeting?
August
It's
8th.
August
I think she
20th.
said August 20th.
Yeah.
I bet I missed that meeting. Because that
I
was
think-
like
I
6
think
days.
you possibly did.
6 days before I moved my office, and I was really busy. And because this is just not ringing a bell with me.
Well,
that we
it, because,
had that
you
conversation,
know,
which
because
is
it was
why I feel like
questioned
I've been out
about,
of
you
the loop
know,
on
it was
which
questioned
is
about
fine.
when this was, you know,
Yeah.
when this all was happening, and I was glad to hear that she,
Yeah.
you know, admitted to the commission tonight that I had a conversation with her after, you know, she first off broached the specific subject of offering to hold the CR at the conclusion of the selectmen's meeting when I was in attendance to support their purchase of the salt marsh parcel.
Sounds like, yeah.
And even at that point in time, she told me that she wasn't 100% sure because she had to go approach what they call their land committee
Right.
to get them to give her an authorizing vote as to whether this would be done. So I had made her aware shortly after that I was pursuing the Audubon and the application to the Community Preservation Act Committee because I had time deadlines, and
Right.
you know, I didn't know when she was going to get feedback from the land committee, but there,
If at
you know,
all.
there shouldn't be any dashed expectations or animosity, because, you know, the timing for a lot of these decisions were not synchronized. It wasn't like, you know, we had both of those organizations approach us right off with both of them saying,
Competing.
we're authorized to enter
Right.
into a CR agreement with you.
And following that meeting, to continue along your theme here, the fall town meeting was coming up fairly quickly, and although it happened in November, but the cutoff point for warrant articles
Right.
from the selectmen was the 30th of September, and
Right.
and the Community Preservation Act Committee voted on the application for the Audubon,
It was on
18,000.
September 24th.
On
or
September
something like that.
27th, I think.
Yeah, right around that time
And-
period.
And the
yeah.
warrant article had to be prepared in time for the Monday selectmen's meeting.
Oh, yeah, Laura and I were working on it right that weekend.
On the
so.
30th, which was also the deadline for the warrant article.
Yep.
And it wasn't until after that we found out that Fish and Game, you know,
Right.
had approved all this.
After that, she
The
came back
timing
and
was-
said the land committee
Oh,
had, you know, approved it, so yeah, I mean,
Well, I mean, I think, I didn't sense any animosity on her part.
No.
I think she understood.
you didn't have
everything.
the initial phone call.
I know. Well, I'm glad she didn't come in, you know,
She's
feeling
learned more
offended.
things since then.
Yeah, she's understood.
Talked with Bob Ford.
Talked with Bob Ford.
No.
So, and of course, the only reason we got in touch with her at all at that particular moment was so that she didn't put a bunch of work in on something that was futile. We were trying to be polite about it. But I'm
well,
glad
right,
it all
because-
worked out, because I think their proposal is viable, and we may save the town some money here.
Right, and I got the sense tonight that some of the stuff that she had been working on, no matter what the pathway is that ends up to protecting the property, that she was going to need that information anyway
Yep.
for the preparation of her grant, so it's, but no matter what had happened at the end of the day, I was about to caution her on how much time she was spending drafting the draft CR article, because I realized it had gotten to the point where it really should be definitively in front of the commission, not just me
Oh,
making
yeah,
comments
Yep,
about
yep.
it, you know, there's.
that's right.
You know, I
That's
can,
right.
I can help in the preparatory work, but when it comes time to actually trying to prepare the document, that needs to be done directly with the commission in an open meeting.
All right, well, it's
Okay.
10:20. I think our
Yeah.
videographer is ready to go home.
If he's still awake.
He's still awake.
Doing his homework.
Let's go. All right, anything else we need to deal with, Brent, that you can think of?
I
Hope not.
don't believe so.
But if we do, bring it up.
Well,
What we're here
it's
for.
been a very busy day
I
tonight,
know.
so I think, I said I tried
All right.
as much as possible to have everything.
Motion to adjourn, perhaps?
We do it in unison.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.